This is Corrections Unlocked. What's up, guys? I'm Alex Duran. Welcome to Corrections Unlocked. Here at Corrections Unlocked, our mission is to share knowledge, to educate officers, and to inspire growth through our experiences working behind the walls. On today's episode, we go one-on-one with a correctional sergeant that has worked one of the toughest beats in the state. He has seen the good, the bad, and the ugly behind the walls. We have Correctional Sergeant Perez, everyone. Perez, welcome to Corrections Unlocked.
Alex, thank you for having me. This is something new, and I am very excited and pleased that you considered me as a candidate to have on this podcast.
I appreciate that. We're really excited to have you here. I just want to start off with saying you have truly proven yourself to be one of the most respected sergeants at CSP Corcoran, and I appreciate everything that you do. So we're just going to get right into it and start off with a few little questions. But right off the bat, what made you want to become a correctional officer?
Funny story about that. So I never really pictured myself as someone that wanted to be in any type of law enforcement. Prior to working in corrections, some may know I used to be a computer tech. So I worked with computers at a school district, and kind of like, I say it jokingly to a lot of people, but it's like there's a little truth to it. I was like, working at a school kind of prepares you as the same way of like what the program or curriculum is working inside the prison. Cause kids have to go to their classes. They're basically sectioned off in areas. You have to watch them when they go to chow or to eat at the cafeteria. You watch them when they go to yard. So it's just a little similarities like that I say, hey, there is some connection between working at a school district and kind of working at a prison. But honestly, I never really saw myself as like wanting to work in the Department of Corrections. When I was working at the school district, I just had hit an area where it was like there was basically no room for growth. I had basically hit a ceiling or plateaued. And I had a supervisor who, to sum it up in words, didn't really want to share any of his knowledge with me to help me promote or ascend or to get to a new goal or position. And so I basically felt like I was going to be stuck where I was at. And at the time, I had a brother who had started in corrections already, and he had 5 years in the department. So he told me, have I ever considered applying for corrections CDCR? And I was like, no, not really. He's all like, you should. And I'm like, I kind of asked him jokingly, I said, well, why do you think I'd be a good candidate for working inside the prison or working in the prison, And he's all like, you have the attitude for it. And I was like, okay. And I was like, what do you mean? He's like, he goes, you can be a bit of a prick sometimes. And I was like, no, I was like, but yeah, I guess he just was trying to say I could be a little blunt or, upfront about things. And so I was like, okay, sure, I'll give it a try. I applied for corrections, and probably just within the year, everything kind of just fell through. Got accepted, started the academy, and then did my transition into corrections from working at a school district.
That's awesome. Now, how much time do you have total from when you started to now?
So I went to the academy October 18th, 2010. Graduated January of 2011. And then from there, February, reported to my first post, which was at Avenal.
Avenal State Prison.
Avenal State Prison, yes. I reported there, and I was there for approximately 9 months before AB 109 hit.
Oh.
And then that shot me over to Corcoran. So I started Corcoran right around 2012. So I've been at Corcoran since 2012. And 11 years now, and then probably my year at Avenal and stuff. So I'm close to like 13 years right now.
It's a level 1, level 2.
Mm-hmm.
And then you go to Corcoran, which is a level 4 maximum security prison.
Mm-hmm.
You have SHU and level 4 GP. What was what was that transition like? Like, were you involved in a lot of incidents at Avenal as an officer?
So the funny thing is, Avenal, the whole time that I was there, I saw one fight
9 months.
on the yard. 9 months.
9 months, and you saw one-on-one fight?
One-on-one fight. And it wasn't even, I wouldn't even say it was like 100% legit fight.
Right.
So
nobody stabbed or killed?
No, nobody stabbed or killed. So we had this yard at Avenal. I think it was their yards went by numbers. So we had Facility 5, which was a yard over there where they had a lot of the ADA inmates, walkers, crutches, wheelchairs, and stuff. And so I think the fight that I saw was between an inmate who had a walker and an inmate who was in crutches. Yeah, and so it was like they were trying to like figure out how they were gonna hit each other without lose their footing and stuff. But
old people home fight.
Yeah, it wasn't even like a legit fight. And then I think they might have sprayed.
Damn, and then so you go to Corcoran. What was it like your first 9 months there compared to Avenal?
Night and day. I think
big eye opener.
Very much so. I think going into Corcoran and stuff, I probably utilized force within the first month that I was there. Jeez. First incident and stuff. Fast forward, now I'm at Corcoran. So within my first 3 days of IST, we're just kind of like getting retrained and stuff. We already had gone through IST in Avenal. But I remember Tony was there. He was the Diaz. Mm-hmm. He was the I think the instructor at the time or lieutenant for that, or maybe he was a sergeant. I can't remember, but I know Keener was also there too. And I remember we were in IST and 3A yard went down. And this was like a big riot that had happened. And we responded.
While you were in IST doing training?
Yes.
Damn.
Yeah. And I was like, when we responded, we went in through central control. We got they actually called for code 3.
Oh.
Yeah. So it was a big riot. And I remember seeing it, being a part of it, responding with all the staff. And I was just like in awe. Yeah. I was like shocked, but it was like a cool kind of shock because to me, I thought, this is what they show us in those videos, at the academy. Like, I'm actually part of it. And just to see the amount of staff kind of like respond and just flood the yard, and you had green coming in from all aspects. So I don't know if...
That's a cool feeling right there.
Yeah, you just saw them like pouring out through work change. Yeah. And then we were coming in through up the patio. Then you had other staff that had responded through the back alley gate. So like, It was just like everywhere. We were just like swarming in. And I thought it was cool. When we go back to IST and, instructors kind of start like when they're quarterbacking the whole thing and they're like, we messed up here and this was not good. And I'm thinking to myself, like, everything looked like it was like out of a movie to me. Like, I thought it was cool, everything seemed perfect to me. But, I guess that was just me being a new officer and stuff. But yeah, they were like, oh, we could have done this better. We could have done that better. But it was cool. It was
that was just your first 3 days.
Yes.
Damn. So I could imagine 9 months, probably saw a lot more stuff compared to a lower level prison.
Oh yeah, for sure. I, like I said, I got to, I think I used force within the first month that I was there, wrote my reports, wrote some RVRs, and then basically from there, I kind of just started, trying to network and pick up with the senior staff there, my partners and stuff, ask questions, ask what I could do to help out kind of thing. I think that was another, I would say like another thing that benefited me was like, I would always ask like, hey, like, what are we going to do? What can I do? Like, what's the job? Where do you need me to be at? Like kind of things. And so it was like, I kind of never went in there with an attitude of like, I know it already.
Right. That's a big thing you bring up. I feel like if we fast forward to right now, there's a lot of new officers that are struggling with what you just said. You bring up networking. Man, that's big. using your resources. If you see officers with time and experience, talk to them. You can gain so much knowledge just from picking their brain. And I feel like nowadays people struggle with communicating. People don't know how to network, or they're just kind of come off a little too hard-headed, coming into a prison thinking they know it all when they just left, working at Walmart, and for some reason they know it all. Mm-hmm. And it's like, hey, dude, slow your roll. You're not just bagging up shit anymore. You're sitting in a prison setting around 1,000 inmates that are said they can't be in society anymore for a reason. Mm-hmm. So let's kind of talk to your partners and your peers to figure out, hey, man, how do you get by with your time and experience? And I feel like a lot of kids nowadays struggle with that. So you bring up a good point. Networking is huge, man.
Yeah. And I think also too, with the newer staff that has come into, CDCR, mm-hmm. I mean, you have to kind of consider their background or whatever. So they're coming in from being a store manager at Jamba Juice and scheduling stuff or whatever. And then they have to go back to just being a officer who doesn't know what they're coming into, but they have this chip on their shoulder like, oh, you can't tell me what to do. I used to be a manager in my old job. Well, being a manager at Jamba Juice and working in the prison isn't the same thing, kind of thing,
Whole other ball game.
Yeah. So they come in there and they sometimes are a little bit reluctant to take orders or instruction or correction in anything that they might be doing, because they kind of feel like, no, I've already earned, a title in my previous job.
Right.
So
I was a manager at Victoria's Secret.
Right.
I don't got to listen to you.
Huh.
What the fuck?
Exactly.
That's the kind of stuff that, I think people forget too. You're not working a job. You're not working retail. You're working in an environment where you can get stabbed, you can get killed, and you're going to be here for 20, 30 years. Like, these people you're working with, these are your partners. They're going to have to either back you up, possibly save your life at one time. So you coming in with, oh, you know what, maybe I'm just going to hang out and not really work, or I'll leave those escorts for those guys. Mm-hmm. Like, you have no business coming in trying to be lazy in this environment. Mm-hmm. Like, you need to come in, you need to prove yourself, you need to put in the work, so that way everybody knows they can count on you and they know you're a solid cop.
Yeah.
Yeah, but you nailed it on that.
Yeah. And I got really lucky too coming into the department at the time that I did, because it was you still had a lot of veteran staff in the department when I started. And then as you think about it now, like fast forwarding to now, there's not that many veteran staff. Mm-hmm. Like, they're slowly kind of trickling out. So a lot of that knowledge is quickly leaving the job site.
Right.
So a lot of these new officers coming in, I kind of feel for them, because they're not going to have the resources or the networking opportunities that certain people that have been in the department had.
Right.
And going off that, that's why I think it's essentially more important now for supervisors that are coming up to share their knowledge with the newer staff. When we were talking earlier, I never feel like, when you said, oh, you're a sergeant with a lot of time, I've never felt like that. I felt like I'm always constantly learning, and there's just still so much more for me to basically take in. And I never feel like I'm like an OG, but I mean, without knowing it, we assume those roles later.
Right.
Just time happens and you end up becoming an OG, and you're not even acknowledging that you are one. I'm not saying that I'm one, but
you're a 30% sergeant, right? And you've been one for a while.
Yeah.
Yeah, you're an OG.
But I do appreciate the knowledge that was passed on to me, and I want to try to basically, pay it forward and send it along, to the newer staff that might need it in their time in the career and stuff at CDC.
No, you bring up a good point, and I think people forget, a lot of the senior staff and people we look up to, they're not here anymore. They retired, they moved out, or they moved up. We kind of got to take that initiative to step up and play that role, because we know a lot, but we don't share a lot. And I was told a long time ago, knowledge is power. Mm-hmm. And the more you share, the more powerful you're making your officers, your staff.
Right.
I remember when I transferred there, I got the cold shoulder. I wasn't welcomed, and people didn't really care to talk to me. But the more that I opened up and the more that I showed that I was, hey man, I'm here to learn. I'm here to have your back. I'm humble, but you have to take that initiative and show it. No one's going to give it to you. And the more work I put in, doing paperwork, helping people out, showing them that, hey, I can be a solid supervisor. I can be a solid cop. I had OG start taking me under their wing and saying, all right, youngster, you fucked up enough. Let me show you how to actually do it. But if you come in with the wrong attitude, no one's going to be welcoming to you.
Right.
You know, so you put in your time at Corcoran, you were an officer. What made you take that big step to become a first line supervisor?
So going back to when I was talking earlier in my previous job, I always wanted to learn and better myself as a computer tech. So I was kind of wanting my supervisor to show me more of what they knew, what they had as far as knowledge and resources. But, you know, it was just like I said, it was a ceiling that I hit. It wasn't very, you know, conducive to me at the time. And I wasn't able to move forward on that. So what kind of made me want to promote was that I started in corrections looking at it as an opportunity in a new career that had many possibilities.
There's so much opportunity.
Yes, many opportunities.
I try telling people too, like, it's not just promoting up, you know, sergeant, lieutenant, captain, AW. Like, you can be a counselor, CC1, CC2, CC3. You can go paroles.
Yep.
You can now go into investigations and do AIMS work. Or like Christina, you can do ISU work. I mean, there's like 10 different avenues you can take in this line of work and be completely successful. And it really just depends on what you want to do.
Yep. And that's kind of like, that was the mindset that I had when I started in the department. Is like, I'm going to start this new career, but I'm not going to stay where I'm at. Like, I want to learn more. I want to grow, better myself. I want to take opportunities and try new things. So that, and I'll be honest too, I think, you know, speaking bluntly, I noticed at the time that there were supervisors basically in their line or in their way of supervising was very questionable. And it's like, I really told myself as a kind of like a reflection, I was like, you could do better than that.
Right.
You could be a better supervisor than that. So it's like, why not take that next step?
Mm-hmm.
You know, do you want to be the person who kind of just stays where they're at, complains, becomes negative, and does nothing to change it?
Right.
Or do you want to be the person who tries to take that step forward, improve, and make a change to help yourself and others? So that's kind of what pushed me to be forward. It's like, you know, you could be a better supervisor than some of the supervisors that work for you. Now, granted, I had a ton of supervisors that were great.
Right.
You know, but there was just a couple that kind of motivated you to ascend to that rank, because now you're like, I'm not going to be basically taking orders from you. Now we're going to be peers.
You're right. My brother told me a long time ago when I started, when I was younger, I was like, man, Mike, I don't know about this. Like, this sergeant's telling me this and this lieutenant's doing that. And he's like, Alex, you got a problem with it? Do something about it. I was like, what do you mean? He said, you got a problem with something? You're an officer. Move the fuck up.
Mm-hmm.
Move up. Get to a position where you can do something about it. You can make change. You don't like the way that they're not showing staff how to do this and do that, then promote. So that way, when you're in those shoes, you can say, this is what I'm not going to do. And you can make your officers actually feel like they're learning something, that you're approachable. Be that guy that you see that they're not doing.
Yeah. And
I took with it. I've been running with it. I'm not where I want to be yet, but hey, you know, I'm still running. I'm kind of slow, but I'm going to keep moving.
No, you're doing great. Yeah.
I try to do what I can, but now, man, I remember just seeing you on the facility, you being a facility sergeant, like on a level 4 facility. You have experience everywhere, man. And, you know, what were some of the things you struggled with as a new correctional sergeant? Because we're going to have a lot of people becoming into that correctional sergeant position. I know the test was just out. I know people took the test. I think a lot of people feel like they failed, but I'm sure they did really good.
Yeah.
And then 6-8 weeks from now, people are going to be getting these letters whether they passed or failed. And then 6 weeks from there, they're going to be fucking interviewing.
Mm-hmm.
And then next thing you know, they're going to have stripes on their shirt, and people are going to be looking up to them, and they're going to be a sergeant. Yeah. And they're going to have officers looking up to them like, hey, what do I do, Sarge?
Yeah.
So when you were put in that position as a new sergeant, where did you work at, and what were some of the challenges that you faced?
So starting off, when I first promoted newly as a sergeant, that was in 2015. And I remember that going into it, I was really nervous. I was really intimidated, I think, by the position itself, because you carried a lot of, not a lot, but you carried more weight.
Right.
Like what you said, kind of like your orders or your instructions. And when I newly started as a sergeant, I got placed on a very interesting facility. I got placed on 3B facility.
Okay. Oof.
So I was coming in as a new sergeant to 3, possibly 4 holding cages full with inmates claiming safety concerns. And I'm like, well, what's that?
Damn.
And I'm like trying to figure things out, what does that mean?
Mm-hmm.
And then like, oh, that means that you have to, place them in administrative segregation and lock them up. Oh, okay. And then you have to complete a closure chrono. Well, what's that? And it's like, you just started getting bombarded with like this whole new level of paperwork and stuff. And
sink or swim, huh?
Yeah, sink or swim. And it was like a daily basis kind of thing, And then they're all like, but Sarge, you still have to put out yard. And Sarge, you still have to get chow going. And I'm all like, okay. And Sergeant, you still have to get day rooms out. And you have to do this, that, and the other, and walk the yard and do grid searches and, yada, 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 all this stuff. And I'm all like.
And they're all asking you.
Right.
The officers are like, hey, Sarge, when do we start this? When do we do that?
Yes.
Damn.
So it was interesting. And it was interesting to say the least. And a lot of work. It was a lot of prioritizing. And being new to that, being unaware, I guess, of all the different tasks that came along with it, you just had to kind of like learn it on the fly. And that was another thing too. Like when I promoted from an officer to a sergeant, I didn't know what the tasks and responsibilities were as a supervisor. I just knew that it was, something that I wanted to do. As far as like, I didn't really have a grasp of like the whole like workload. You can study and you can know like paperwork and stuff, and you can read, what confidential closures are, what safety concern closures are. You can read 128B general chronos and stuff. But when you're actually doing it and stuff, it's way different. It's like
eye-opening, man.
Yeah. For the people that want to promote and that look to promote, I always tell them, look, when I came into corrections, I didn't know how to be an officer. You learn it as you go. And it's kind of like, I think it's the same as you ascend up in rank.
Right.
You're not going to know the position. You're going to learn it as you go. It's a lot of trial and error. It's a lot of taking, again, going back to that networking, taking resources and stuff that you've learned from other people and applying it to yourself and making it work for you.
Right.
You make your own system. You make your own, basically you build your own network around you, and you build your own people around you, and you take what is good and then you just apply it to yourself. So that's kind of like what I started trying to do there on that facility. And it was difficult.
So 3B facility, 7 years ago when you were a supervisor over there, because 3B facility now, that's a level 2 non-designated.
Yes.
Well, what was it when you were a supervisor there?
So when I was a supervisor, I believe it was level 4 SNY.
Right.
And EOP on the yard. And you had like, it was like, you just had like this surge, I think at the time, of like these new SNY gangs.
You guys had some big SNY gangs that were running shit over there.
Yes.
I remember, I think your riders and your 2-5ers were fucking kicking off.
Oh, yeah. Yeah. And then I saw some, got involved in some gnarly incidents and stuff with these SNY gangs. And I'm all like, wait, they're on a SNY yard. Why are they still politicking? Why are they still, trying to, be gangs, be gangsters?
Man, when I transferred to Corcoran and I was on 3B facility as a new sergeant, I don't know what the fuck I was doing. this inmate, we're on the yard. They just did yard release. We're sitting on the patio, and all the OGs are sitting right there, right on the patio. And I'm kind of just posted up, and they're like looking at this fucking 20-year-old sergeant and shit, you know, and I'm trying to get my flow, you know, and I look like a nerd and shit. And this fucking inmate walks up to the side of me and he goes, "What's up, Durant?" And I turned and looked at him, and dude, my fucking jaw just dropped. And I went straight into a fucking, you know, bladed stance. I was like, "Oh, let's get down." Because I recognized this inmate. And all the officers in the patio were like, "What the fuck's going on?" And this dude looked at me. He's like, "You remember me?" And I said, "Yeah, I remember you." So backtrack like 12, 13 years ago when I was a kid, I worked in Kern County Jail. And when I was over there working, it was busy. You guys had the AB 109 kick in, and I think you sent us like 150 state inmates.
Oh, sure.
Long story short, this 125er, he was in there for just small time shit, but he was battering cops every day. Battering cops, stabbing cops, gassing cops. Yeah, Kern County. And we had a bad incident with him where he cut his head open, played dead. Long story short, we went in for like a medical cell entry and had to extract him. He tried stabbing me twice.
Oh.
And, you know, he got what he had coming, and it is what it is. But that was kind of that. And, you know, like I said, I was a kid, and now we fast forward 12 years later, and he sees me on the yard. He recognized me right away. And he said, "Hey, so looks like you're doing all right for yourself, huh?" And my first instinct was like, this dude's going to fucking fuck me up. And I didn't realize that this is how you know those officers are corking or OG gangsters. They all started forming a circle, getting ready to fucking help me out.
Yeah.
You know? And the inmate was cool. He's like, "Hey, man, you know, remember back over there in Kern?" I said, "Yeah, I remember." He's like, "It is what it is, man. I had that coming." You know what I mean? And he's all, "But you take care of yourself." And that was it. He walked off. It was cool. I looked down. I think I had a couple of drops of piss in my pants. You know, I was a little nervous. But it is what it is. And these cops are like, "Hey, dude, are you cool? You straight?" I was like, yeah. They're like, "Hey, how do you know that guy?" And I was like, "Oh, it's a long story, man." They're like, "Hey, be careful with that dude. He's fucking violent." And I was like, "Yeah, I know." But I was just there for the day. I was like a coverage sergeant when I first started, man. And that facility was fucking busy.
It was.
You guys were kicking off. There was, I mean, not one. You know, you go back saying you saw one fight at Avenel in 9 months. You'd see it like 2 to 5 fights a day.
A day.
On 3B facility, man. It was crazy. How did you manage that? You know, being a new supervisor, being overwhelmed with paperwork, with locking inmates up, with managing your staff on how to be a strong leader. Like, how do you start that?
And that was, I think also too, the other part that was really difficult for me was going into a supervisory role with a lot of like OG officers, you know, and you're a brand new sergeant. They're like looking at you like, this guy doesn't know, like, you know, doesn't know like what he's talking about, doesn't know what he's about, or kind of like, you know, I don't know him. I have no,
right.
You know, so it was really difficult. I think 3B was like my biggest challenge as a supervisor. And I think at that time, unfortunately, what happened was it was a lot to take on. And I had a lieutenant that was working with me at the time who I was not very familiar with. We had like basically never worked with each other. So I think like the lieutenant was trying to figure me out. I was trying to figure the lieutenant out, and then still trying to figure out the whole role as a sergeant. I had the support and I had the backing, but when we would end up like having a cancel program because I'm having inmates go suicidal to CTC, I'm locking up inmates in ADSIG as well. I'm sending 3 to 6 S&Es off the yard at a time, and then I'm like, well, we can't run yard. But what I can do is I can cancel a day room in a building, have those officers come out, and then we could start running yard or watch yard at that time. And I kind of started, you know, that was basically where I started like modifying the program and trying to figure things out. And then it didn't go very well with the captain at the time. And so it was like, you know, basically I was told like, figure it out. like kind of thing, like figure out how to run program and still do what you have to do with the limited resources that you have. And I was like, it's just impossible, you know?
Mm-hmm.
It was very, like I said, it was very, very intimidating and very frustrating at times, and just kind of hitting the wall, you know, hitting a brick wall and just trying to figure out like, well, what can I do? You know, what can I run? And basically trying to just, you know, from there, just keep it within like policy of what was safe to run, you know, what was safe to have out. So 3B, like I said, was my biggest challenge. It was also my first job ever that I took as a management.
Oh, okay.
I had never been in a management spot before. And so a lot of it, I mean, a lot is expected from you when you're in any type of management role.
Yeah.
So I took it. I think I was there for maybe 3 to 4 months. And then, the captain had me changed out. And I granted, I agree, because I think it was a really difficult spot for a new sergeant to basically get his flow going in there, because there's just so much, you know, going on. And so I got switched out and I got sent to first watch, and I was on first watch for a while. From first watch, I bid a coverage position, which allowed me to work in various other job capacities as a supervisor. And, you know, basically I got to see outside of 3B what 3A was like, 3C, so forth and so on. It was good. It was very interesting. It was an eye-opening experience. And I think one of my biggest suggestions for any new supervisor is don't get comfortable in a spot, or if you're offered a management spot and you have, you know, less than 6 months in as a supervisor, I would say very, very kindly turn it down and get experience working in other places. Right. Because if you get locked into a certain area and that becomes you, like, you're not going to learn anything past that. And I think as a new supervisor, to be well-rounded, to have knowledge and to have experience, you have to learn and see how basically these other areas around you function and run. And I think too many times a lot of people are like, oh no, I want that specialty spot, or I want that, you know, that position that gets me away from inmate contact or whatever, or not having to deal with that. And then at the end, you don't get that experience of, you know, running a facility or being in a different type of area where.
Take the easy way out, man.
Yeah.
I want to say you worked level 4 GP for quite a few years as a facility sergeant.
I did. So after my little hiatus of 3B and going into coverage and holiday sergeant, I did those two. I was given opportunity again to go to 3C. And that was when Captain Weaver was over there. She actually came to me and she said, hey, I have a spot. I'd like for you to come work for me. And I said, okay, sounds good.
Right.
I want to say that the reason 3C worked out a lot better for me was because they put me on third watch. Mm-hmm. And I had a whole brand new staff. So I had new officers. Me still considering myself being a new sergeant, you know, it was a lot easier for me to gain that morale and gain that respect. And then also, I was given a lot of free reign with placing my staff wherever I wanted. So I had my management jobs on the yard, but I also had other jobs in the buildings that at the time, 3C was a level 4. Nobody was bidding my control booths. Nobody was bidding my floor spots. So I had a lot more pull with personal assignments as plugging in people in there. Right.
People you can actually train.
Yes.
That's good.
And that was one of my biggest jobs and challenges too, was canvassing. I canvassed a lot, and I would constantly get an influx of new officers, and I would kind of like, you know, screen them a little by just seeing how they were going out and responding to yard, how they were working. When I would do my tours and stuff in the buildings, if the new officers were out there, you know, doing their cell searches, their paperwork kind of stuff. So I did a little bit of homework, a little background check and stuff. And I started basically piecing together my work crew.
Yeah, your team.
And I am, and will always be a firm believer that a supervisor is only as good as the people he surrounds himself with. So you want to get people that work. You want to get people that have that motivation.
Right.
You want to get people that have that drive. And you also want to get people that like are motivators to others, you know, like they get the other crew going, you know, as well.
Right.
You know, they don't let people kind of sit around. They're like, hey, come on, let's go do this. Let's go walk the yard. Let's go do our grid searches. Let's go hand out our ducats, do our paperwork kind of stuff. You want to get those kind of workers. And I got very lucky because I handpicked a couple of really good officers at the time who have now become supervisors.
Right.
Who went down that road. And I kind of like, in a sense, I'm not saying I take credit for what they did, but I want to say I contributed a bit to their desire to promote and to move up as well. And they taught me a lot too. Like I had certain officers that went into squad. Right. A lot from 3C that went into squad. Right. So they showed me a lot of like these really like tough confidential closures and these reports and stuff. Like they were out there doing their surveillance and basically tracking the gangs and who was what, and they had their breakdowns and their AKAs and a lot of things like that. And so to me, never coming up that route as far as like being like very interested in like, you know, gang fighting and all that kind of stuff, right. ISU stuff, like they were learning all that stuff and they were kind of sharing that little bit of knowledge with me too.
Resources for you as a supervisor.
Yeah.
That's good. When I transferred to corporate, I faced a little bit differently. I went to 3A facility and all my SDs in yard had 13 to 20 years in. And, you know, I look like a fucking 10-year-old kid. So I had my fucking work cut out for me, you know, and all these newer officers that are going to be promoting this next year, they're going to face a lot of those challenges too. Oh, yeah. You're going to be dealing with officers with, you know, 8 to 20, 25 years in the department. And I learned right off the back, you don't tell people what to do. You ask them, and it's just more of a sign of respect. Mm-hmm. Can you tell anybody what to do? Yeah, you are their supervisor. But when you're down talking and you're telling people shit, they lose respect for you right away. Yeah. And I noticed when I asked, even though they knew at the end of the day they had to do it, type of thing, when I just said, hey guys, can you guys help out with this? That went a long ways, especially with people that have more time than you in the department. And I slowly started gaining the respect. Another thing that worked for me too was just leading by example. And you brought that up earlier. Mm-hmm. Just showing people that you're willing to do the same job that they're doing. You're not just asking them to do it. You're saying, hey, guys, we got to do this. This is what needs to be done. If you want, I'll help out. And you do this, I'll do that. Showing them that, showing them that you're willing, you know, to put in the work too. You know, just because I'm a sergeant doesn't mean I'm better than you. Right. I ain't going to do anything. I'm not going to ask you to do anything that I wouldn't do. Exactly. You know, so that goes a long ways. And I had my work cut out. It was really challenging over there. And then my lieutenant, you know, I'll be honest, he was an asshole. He was a fucking asshole to me. And love the guy, solid dude. He's retired now, Perry Hurlbutt. And when I met him, everyone's like, hey, dude, why'd you bid that yard? I was like, well, I don't know. Has Friday, Saturdays off. Why not? They're like, you know who the lieutenant is? I was like, I mean, I heard of him. They're like, good luck. I didn't know what that meant, transferring from CTF. So I remember when I started there and he walked into the program office and looked at me, and I got my hair slicked back and my shit all creased, looking like a straight new boot. He grabbed all of his fucking paperwork out of his folder and threw it right into my box and said, hey, Sarge, get to work. And I was like, oh, what the fuck? So me trying to figure out how to be a sergeant, now trying to figure out how to be a lieutenant because I got to do his work. I was like, fuck, dude. And, you know, I don't know a lot, but I am a hard worker. And I don't care what you put in front of me. I'm going to get it done. And networking, using your resources as a supervisor has gotten me far. and will get a lot of people far, especially when you don't know how to do certain things. And I struggled, man. I struggled for a few months trying to figure out how to do staff complaints, appeals. Boom, Duran, stop. We have an incident. Oh, we have another incident. Prioritizing, directing, using your resources. What officers can I count on to do this? Who are my strengths and who are my weaknesses? Mm-hmm. You know, what officer's better at doing computer stuff? Hey, you help me out with this. Hey, so-and-so, you do the escort. And took me about 3 to 4 months before some of the OG sergeants working on second watch, like Augie Perez and David Case. I mean, you put those two guys together, I mean, you got like a mafia sergeant and a cowboy sergeant, and those two dudes are fucking solid.
Yeah.
And you put them in the same room, man, holy smokes. And those two guys took me under their wing because they saw me struggling. They said, hey, fucking kid, here's the confidential. This is how you write it. And Case was just more knowledgeable with talking, man. He knew how to talk to inmates. And he said, hey, Duran, you should, we're going to lock these guys up because of this, this, and that. If you need help, this is how I do it. So getting help from them. And like I said, Hurlbut was an asshole to me, but he fucking showed me a lot, man. He really did. And it was tough love. But I had a lot of respect for him, and a lot of people do, because that dude can do incidents like no other. He knew how to fucking write, and he was solid about that. And that was one thing I took from him, seeing how he did incidents, seeing how he wrote. He was good at that. And if you actually knew Hurlbut, like, he was a good dude. If you didn't know him, you thought he was an asshole. But after a good year of putting my head down and working and learning how to be a supervisor, after that year, he let me run it. And they don't let you do that really anymore as a sergeant, but he let me run that facility, man. It was cool. I went from just sitting there with deer in the headlights, hair slicked back, not know what the fuck I'm doing, to the officers respected me. And Perry was like, hey, Duran, what type of program we running today? It was fucking cool.
Yeah.
But it took me a while to figure out my flow. And now with, all these new officers that are going to be taking this test and they're going to be promoting, I think any type of advice you can give them, we can give them, it will be very beneficial to them in this next year coming up.
Oh, no, I agree 100%. Like you said, you hit really, really, really good, strong points as what's needed to be a good, reliable supervisor. You need the ability to delegate, you need the ability to organize, prioritize. And those are a lot of the aspects for these new and upcoming sergeants that if you don't have those already, I strongly recommend that, and I guarantee you will need them in your new line of career as a supervisor, and touching a little bit on that is the whole organizing, delegating, and prioritizing kind of thing. You have to be really careful to not cross that fine line of a lot of these new sergeants that are coming up or have come up have friends, homies, cliques, that kind of stuff that they want to bring along with them. And I'm not saying no to that by any means. I'm not saying don't give a friend a good job because, this, that, or the other. But just be aware and be cognizant that there still has to be that line between, hey, professionally, I'm your supervisor, you're the officer. If I request for something to be done, I expect that you give it your best, effort to complete the task. Because to me, at the end of the day, it's not about first watch, second watch, or third watch. All watches work together to make a facility run. You basically have to coordinate. I know that also too, coming from, like I said, going back to working on 3C for a minute there. It was just a brief minute. You had your little separation, your little break in between. Oh, second watch is dumping all this load on third watch, all these extra tasks for us to do, the lift program, leave it for third. And, I had a really good captain that worked for me at the time. That was actually right after Weaver left. Gallagher was over there, and Gallagher was like, you need to figure it out. You need to figure out how to work with second watch. And basically all watches, like I said, you're a fine-tuned oil machine. You have to make the gears work. You have to make it crank out, because at the end of the day, everything is to make that facility run the the best way that it can run, the most optimal way that it can be run, and benefit everybody at the end, so it's not pitting watches against watches. It's just like, okay, cool. I'm doing this to help out second watch. And then later on down the road, I might need a favor from second watch and they might be able to, help me out with that. And I learned that working with the supervisors on 3C, especially with Navarro. And it actually ended up benefiting me too, because I ended up kind of doing swaps. So
you got to work with the second watch crew.
Yes.
And the third watch crew.
And then I would kind of like try to get them both in sync the best that I could.
That's awesome.
So that helped out a lot. So going back is just telling these supervisors, these new and upcoming supervisors, that's fine if you're going to give, your homie from the academy a job as a management cop, but just know that a little bit extra is expected of those management cops, and they're expected to help you look as a supervisor the best that you can, basically. Right. So I like I said, I got lucky because I handpicked a lot of my management jobs, and a lot of those management officers actually reflected really good on me.
Mm-hmm.
And that's why I kind of like, to a certain extent, I wouldn't mind praising them or giving them any type of like, recognition, because they basically made me look good.
Right. Man, I like the way you said that. Something else I wanted to touch on too is, when you're working with seasoned officers and you're a sergeant, you kind of get pressured into, well, can I ask them to do things? Because they have a lot of time in. So then you start putting pressure on your newer cops or your cops with less time in. And one thing I made it a point with my officers when I worked over there is I would, we'd always meet at the beginning of the shift, and I would let them know. I said, hey, man, I know you do this, I know you do that, and I know you do this, but man, I expect everybody to fucking work, dude.
Mm-hmm.
I don't want to be picking on this new kid because he has 2 fucking years in. I don't want to be picking on this guy because he got held. Like, we need to represent our facility. Mm-hmm. We need to show them, you know what I mean? We fucking lead. And telling them that made them feel a little bit more empowered. But I would also pick on not my new cops, but I mean my seasoned cops, and say, hey, man, this kid just started. Can you show him how to do an escort? Can you show him how to cuff this dude up? And they'd be like, yeah, Durant, I got you. And in return, you're giving them the respect. You're letting them know that you count on them to get shit done. And they're going training these guys and giving them every knowledge that they can. And in return, as a whole, everybody's becoming better. So I didn't really pick on my seasoned cops, but they knew what I expected of them. They knew if we had to escort 8 inmates to another facility, they'd be picking up the first 2 or 3.
Yeah.
And for the kids that think they can hide out and not work, or they're just fucking lazy, well, I'd call them by name on the radio and they'd be going to work. Because, it's all tough love. It's all, we're all officers. We're all going to share it. If you think you can hide out this and that,
yeah,
it doesn't work that way. And as a new sergeant, that's a challenge that I face, and I feel like people are going to face, is, well, just because this guy has 15 years and I can't ask him to do anything. No, that's bullshit.
Yeah.
Hold everybody accountable.
Yeah.
But, nowadays, a lot of these officers with time in, they are working. I feel like it's flip-flopped. It's a lot of these younger kids that feel like they don't need to work or they feel entitled. I don't know if that's because where we're at with things nowadays, but I feel like a lot of people have lost the whole, military structure, hierarchy of officer, sergeant, lieutenant, and kind of lost the respect there. But I feel like it's something that we need to get back on track on,
Yeah, no, I agree. And, I've always been also a firm believer of you get more accomplished by asking than ordering people,
Yeah.
And that does go a long way. Like you said earlier, it does go a long way when you ask them and stuff. The other thing too, going back to the new supervisors coming up, is they need to be aware that they're not excluded from anything. Like, you used to be you used to be an officer before you became a supervisor. So that doesn't mean that you're not eligible to do escorts anymore, that you're not eligible to help out with chow on a steam line if you have to.
Right.
And a lot of these sergeants, newly promoted sergeants or upcoming sergeants may feel like, oh yeah, once I'm a sergeant, I just kick back. I don't do anything. Well, no, nothing's beneath you. You're always going to be in a capacity to, like you said, lead by example.
Right.
You're going to get more done. Like, I think that's kind of what helped me out too, is that I would be like, oh, cool. Yeah, we have, like you said, 8 to escort ADSEG. Okay, cool. The SNEs will pick up the escorts. And then if I have to, I'll go on an escort, of course, being like that, I may have, obviously check with your supervisor, check with your lieutenant if that's okay. And then also I would always do that with knowing that I would leave somebody behind, like that bumped up.
Right.
Like that was another thing too. Like I think that was another aspect in my role as a supervisor that benefited me, was that I have always been a firm believer of, you train people to replace you, to do what your job is.
Right.
You impart on them the knowledge you have, and you get them ready to become supervisors, to do the job of a sergeant. So when I would do something like, say, go off the facility for an escort, or go off the facility to complete a interview for a confidential closure in ADSEG, I would always have one of my officers bump up. Hey, you're a sergeant on the yard. I'm leaving you my sergeant keys. This is what's going to happen. Right. And I think that, in a sense, too, gives them a little bit more of a hey, I got to do good.
Right.
I got to,
he's trusting me.
Put my best foot forward. Yeah, he's trusting me. And I think that's a lot of what like these newer staff need to learn and do, is like, hey, you want to share what you have. You want to basically train people to be sergeants. That's what I feel.
No, that's 100%. And one thing I've always liked is, when you're a sergeant, you should always have like 2 or 3 people that you're training to do your job, that you can count on, that you're, showing everything, all your knowledge to them. And then same thing with your lieutenant. Your lieutenant should be showing you everything as a sergeant to do his job.
Right.
And it just keeps trickling down, lieutenant to captain, all the way up. And when facilities and certain prisons do that, you just notice as a whole, they're very strong.
Yes.
Because if you're asking an officer questions, he's already thinking like a sergeant.
Mm-hmm.
And, there's a few prisons that I've called that I know that they work that way. And, man, it's awesome, because you're like, fuck, these officers are squared away.
Yeah.
They already know how to do the lockup orders. They know how to do confidentials. They already have a game plan before I ask them. So when I worked at a facility, that was something that I try to implement, and I had a few good officers that are now promoted now, and they're good sergeants, man. And, I'm still trying to work my way up with other things, trying to learn where I'm at. But there's other lieutenants and other captains that I look up to, and man, they're very knowledgeable, but I pick their brain, I learn from them, and I just try to like expand as much as I can. Mm-hmm. And it goes all the way up, all the way down. You got to show your officers. And that's something I like that you guys do where you work at now. You have 4 sergeants, and if there's one incident in one area, it's not just that sergeant and those officers. All you guys go together as a whole, and you tackle it as a team. Yeah. And when the inmate population sees you guys working together, they're like, fuck, dude, how are we going to get through to all these guys? And now there's 2 lieutenants over there, so they're like, fuck, they call it fucking code 3? Why is there so many dudes in here? Right. It's because the population you're working with is max custody, and the amount of staff you have on the facility now. And I like that you guys work together, and you guys do training all the time. You guys show cops, not shit that's being implemented in other places that's not as important, but you're showing shit that's like happening yesterday. Yeah. Hey, this is how this inmate attacked staff. Let's come up with a game plan to fix it. Yeah. And you guys are showing examples, and that's awesome. That's what it all comes down to. Yeah.
And I think like that also too, in a sense, I feel like I was very spoiled moving from 3C to 4A because of that aspect of having more partners. On 3C, as a third watch sergeant, you're in charge of everything.
Just you.
Yeah. And it was funny because I remember before my dad passed away, I remember having an argument with him. And not necessarily an argument. It was a heated discussion. Mm-hmm. We weren't like tempers weren't raised, or, voices weren't, raised or flaring or anything like that. It was just a very intense discussion because my dad could not believe that as a sergeant over 3C, I would be in charge of close to 25 officers. He's like, no, there's no way. Man. Like, you can supervise maybe like 5 people. Yeah. You can't supervise 25 people. And I'm like, that's what's required of you.
Right.
Like, because you're in charge of your dining, you're in charge of your clinic, you're in charge of your observation, you're in charge of your work change, any PIA that are back there, and then plus your facility, your buildings, with three officers in each. So that's like 15 right there. Plus not counting your yard staff and your SNEs. So my dad's all like, there's no way there's no way you can supervise a crew of 25 people. I'm like, I do it on a daily basis.
You do a good job at it, man. I remember when you were the facility sergeant over there, you had a good crew, a good clique, and you guys all worked together good, man.
Yeah, it took a while, but like I said, I think I was very fortunate and blessed to have come across and canvass good people. And don't get me wrong, like I think like later on, Navarro and I on second and third watch, we ended up having words because he ended up starting to like poaching my people, and it's like,
oh shit,
bro, it's like I go through all this work and effort to try to find these people that work for me, and then you come up and swoop up on them, and then that's another thing too. I think it's very important and very essential for a good supervisor to not stand in the way of progress. I have always told my officers, if something better comes along, by all means.
Right.
You are not obligated or tied down to me, but I do appreciate and value the time and effort that you gave this yard and this watch working for me.
Right.
That's what I tell them. I go, but if something comes along better, by all means, please do not hesitate to jump on that.
Right.
And as a supervisor, you have to be willing to lose those good cops, but you also have to be constantly training and canvassing for bodies to fill those things. So it never ends, it's like a cycle.
Man, I just went through that, and I was talking to my manager and said, hey man, I just got offered a position. He's like, you motherfucker. And I was like, oh gosh, this isn't going to go good. Yeah. And he's like 3 times my size, so that makes him more scarier. Mm-hmm. But I said, hey dude, second watch works out better for me and the kids. I can pick my son up from school. I said, if you don't want me to go, I'll stay. I have a lot of respect for you. He's like, you motherfucker. I was like, well, I guess that means I ain't going anywhere. And, he was real. He said, hey, man, if it works better for you, fucking go for it, man.
Right.
I respect you. I do the same thing if I was in your shoes. He's like, but just so you know, I'm going to send you like 35 grievances to do. I was like, oh, fuck. But no, it was all respect and love. And, it was hard for me to make that decision. But if something comes better, you got to run with it, man.
Yeah, for sure.
I might only be there for a week or two and get bumped out, but it is what it is,
Yeah. I'm
going to try it out and I'm going to roll with it. One thing I wanted to touch on, as a sergeant, you have so much more responsibility and officers are counting on you. How do you deal with stress management? Because there's stress not only inside the walls, but outside the walls with shit we deal with at home. How do you manage that and then go to work and be a supervisor? I feel like that's something that new sergeants can really learn from. You know what I mean?
Yeah. It's been very something that's constantly evolving with me. There's, I'm always trying to develop new ways or new methods of dealing with any kind of stress. One of the things I think that helps me out the most, and people laugh because they say, like, you live in Delano. Why don't you work at North Kern or Kern Valley? Right. That's like 5 minutes away from where you live. And I'm all like, yeah, but to me, that 30-minute drive to decompress on the way home, or that 30-minute drive to work to maybe like get revved up and amped up with some music or something, I think that's very essential for you to get kind of in a somewhat stable mindset to deal with it. I've had my days on 3C where I've had like 4 or 5 incidents on the yard, and you're just like, when is this going to stop? Right. But I always try to remind myself and say, hey, it can only pour, it can only rain for so long. Right. After a while, the sun's going to come up, it's going to dry everything up, and you're just going to have blue skies again. So to me, it's like, it's just a small, I always take it as a small step, and like, this is only going to be like this for right now. I've even had my days on 4A when I've had 4 incidents, within like the first 2 hours, from one inmate. And it's just like, and then you just have to, at that point, I think my thought process is I get very quiet, because I'm basically making a list or an outline in my mind of what needs to get done, prioritizing. I'm organizing it. And the officers can kind of see that. And they're all like, hey, P, like, you're quiet. Is everything okay? And I'm like, yeah, I'm just trying to keep everything organized or focused the best that I can right now.
Yeah.
And then they're all like, oh, okay. But then they're like, but you're quiet, but you're not stressed out. And I'm like, well, that's another thing too. It's like, you can't really show your officers that you get overwhelmed with it. I mean, even though you may at the time, but you have to kind of be that pillar for them, you know, that support for them. And if the officers see that you're not stressed, then they start calming down. Yeah. And they react better.
That's awesome, man.
It's hard, you know, it is difficult, but I mean, it's manageable. And I'm sure you've been in that situation, you know, where you've had 20 things to do, you know, and again, delegating is a big thing. Right. Delegating is a huge part. And like you said, relying on your strengths and knowing who your officers that are good at, you know. I used to like to pair, when I'd have a big incident on 3C, I used to like to pair my really good report writing officers with the brand new officers so that they can bounce ideas off of each other. Right.
And show them, you know, because a lot of them are smart. They just don't really know how to put it on paper yet. Yep. You know, and doing what you just said, that helps them. Hey, kind of like a guide. Yeah. You know, that's a good way to put it, man.
The other things that I've done, I haven't done it recently, but I mean, gym used to be a big thing for me. Working out, kind of releasing some of that stress and stuff. Talking to the other half sometimes. Right. I know there's certain people that are firm believers that they don't want their other half knowing anything and what happens within the walls and stuff. And you can still have a conversation with somebody without being very explicit about it. Right. And keeping it generalized, and then just having them give input, or so that they know what your workload is like. Because I think that that's sometimes a huge hurdle for a lot of people to overcome, when they have somebody that maybe isn't in the department and they have to come home and explain to them why they're tired after working 16 hours, 2 16-hour shifts back to back, blah, 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 you know, this, that, and the other.
The more you talk to your partner, they understand. Yes. You know, and I think you have to take that step, because if you're going to be with somebody, you're going to be married to them, you got to open up that door and let them know what you're seeing, you're experiencing, you know, your struggles. So that's good you do that. You know, they need to understand what you deal with, not only as an officer, but now as a sergeant, you know, because it's a different type of mental stress. Oh, yeah. And I struggled. I would get anxiety, you know, when I was a newer supervisor. I'm like, fuck, how do I deal with this? And I hit up this one supervisor that I had a lot of respect for. I'm like, hey, man, you never look stressed. Why don't you ever look stressed out? And he said, Duran, I want you to look down. I said, whoa, what do you mean? He's like, no, Duran, look down at my boots. I was like, all right. I was like, yeah, they look shot the fuck out. He's like, no. He's like, I wiggle my toes when I'm nervous. Nobody ever looks down at your toes. And I was sitting there looking at him. You can see his toes, he's wiggling his toes, you know, and I'm not going to lie. Ever since he told me that, that's what I do. Yeah. Yeah. So when I'm hella nervous or about to do an extraction or whatever, dude, my boots would be fucking wiggling like a motherfucker, but nobody ever looks at that, you know. Hopefully they don't now, but yeah, that's my little outlet is, and even in interviews, my toes are wiggling, but nobody's looking at that. So that's a good thing for me. It gets me by for now.
There you go.
But now, I mean, I have my ways of dealing with stress, and stress is something that comes and goes in different waves and different forms. And then as a supervisor, there's different types of stress. There's mental stress. There's stress that you not create, but you're going to experience with officers. Mm-hmm. You know, you're going to find that line where officers are challenging you. You feel pressured. How do I lead? They don't trust me. And it's all about self-respect, self-discipline, leadership skills, you know, learning them from other leaders and being fair with everybody. You know, you got to know how to implement teamwork. You have to have self-discipline, and you got to be open-minded. And this is where people, I think, fail, is they forget that just because I'm a supervisor, my officer's input doesn't matter. And it really does. So for me, when I would do training, I'd bring in my cops, we'd go over a topic, and I would say, hey, what do you recommend? How would you want to get this done? Ask them these questions so that way you can take all of their, everything into consideration, because you never know what they're going to say. They could have good feedback. They're the ones doing it. So I ask for their advice so that way, as a whole, I look at the whole picture. And when we implement training with the whole facility, I'm able to answer those questions a whole lot better.
Yes.
And then my officers that, count on me, that are actually working for me, have a lot more respect in a sense, because they know that I took their input into consideration. So getting their little feedback and input has helped me a lot,
No, I agree. And I think that you hit like also another, you hit the nail right on the head with that one too, is input. Like
Right.
having I think to me, essential for the new supervisors that are upcoming, I would tell them that it's very important for you to have like a roundtable discussion, a breakdown, maybe pre-shift, post-shift,
Right.
and then have them give their feedback, because that gives them a feeling of importance,
Right.
value. You know what I mean?
No, I think you're right 100%. I mean, being a correctional sergeant can be very challenging, and then knowing how to deal with like the different types of stress that you're going to face, not just at work, but out of work too, because you're not just dealing with the inmate population. Now you're dealing with managers, other supervisors, people looking at you and trying to figure out your flow of how to be a good supervisor. Everybody's different, and everyone has their own flow about going about things. And that's why I like when people have an open line of communication, so that way you can kind of take little things and then you can kind of mold yourself, not as an officer anymore, but now as a correctional sergeant. Well, man, it was nice having you here. Thank you, Perez, for being a guest with us on Corrections Unlocked and for sharing your story with us. Hey, guys, if there's any questions you guys might have about Corrections Unlocked or topics you would like to hear discussed, please reach out to correctionsunlocked@gmail.com. Thank you for listening, and stay tuned for our next episode.